One family controls more of Canada than the Canadian government itself. They own the land under your feet. The stores where you shop. The hotels where you stay. And most Canadians have no idea they even exist. We're talking about a fortune so massive it makes Elon Musk look middle class. A dynasty so powerful they've shaped an entire nation for over 300 years. And the craziest part? They did it all while staying completely invisible. But the truth behind this will shock you. Because this isn't just about money. It's about a family that literally bought a country piece by piece. A family that turned beaver pelts into billions. A family that still pulls strings in boardrooms across North America while you've probably never heard their name. Here's what you're about to discover. First, how one French fur trader's grandson became richer than entire provinces. Second, the secret deal that gave them ownership of land bigger than Texas. And third, the shocking way they still control Canadian real estate, retail, and resources today. This is the story of the Weston family. And by the end of this video, you'll never look at Canada the same way again. Let me show you exactly how this happened. The year is 1882. A young baker named George Weston opens a tiny bread shop in Toronto. He's got flour on his hands and dreams in his head. Nobody knows it yet, but this moment will change Canada forever. George wasn't born rich. He's just a smart guy who notices something. People need bread every single day. And whoever controls the bread controls daily life. So he starts baking. Then he starts delivering. Then he starts buying other bakeries. 1 becomes 2. 2 becomes 10. 10 becomes 50. But here's the first mini surprise. George Weston doesn't just want to sell bread. He wants to own every single step of the process. The flour mills. The delivery trucks. The stores. Everything. This strategy has a name. Vertical integration. It means controlling the entire supply chain from start to finish. And George masters it before most business schools even teach it. By 1900, George Weston Limited is the biggest bakery in Canada. But that's just chapter 1. Now, why does this matter to you as an American viewer? Because the Weston Empire doesn't stop at the Canadian border. They own major brands in the US too. Brands you probably shop at without knowing who's really behind them. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine one family owning Walmart, Target, and Whole Foods at the same time. Then add luxury department stores. Then add the land under shopping malls in every major city. That's the Weston level. The family fortune today sits at around $11 billion officially. But according to sources familiar with their holdings, the real number might be 3 times higher. Because old money families don't show all their cards. Here's mini surprise number 2. The Westons married into British aristocracy. Galen Weston Sr. married a Swedish-born model who became one of Ireland's richest women. His son married a former model and fashion designer. This wasn't just about love. It was about building an empire that spans continents. And mini surprise number 3. The current generation still runs everything. Galen Weston Jr. took over after his father died in 2021. He's worth billions, sits on boards across North America, and most people wouldn't recognize him if he sat next to them on a plane. The Westons perfected something most billionaires fail at. Staying invisible while controlling everything visible. They own Loblaws, Canada's biggest grocery chain. They own Shoppers Drug Mart, where millions buy medicine and essentials. They own Holt Renfrew, the luxury store for Canada's elite. They own Selfridges in London until recently. They own real estate in Toronto, Vancouver, and major US cities. But the really interesting part isn't what they own now. It's how they got it all. Now here's where things get really interesting. The Weston fortune didn't start with fancy stores or real estate deals. It started with bread. Plain, simple, everyday bread. And this is where the genius shows up. George Weston figured out something in the 1880s that Amazon figured out in the 2000s. Control the distribution, and you control the market. Here's how it worked. Every bakery in Toronto bought flour from mills. Then they baked bread. Then they sold it in their shops. George looked at this system and saw waste everywhere. So he bought the mills. Now he controlled the flour. Then he bought delivery wagons. Now he controlled distribution. Then he bought retail locations. Now he controlled the customer relationship. By 1910, George Weston Limited was doing something no Canadian company had done before. They owned every step from wheat to table. And the profits were massive. Let me give you numbers you can picture. A loaf of bread cost about 5 cents in 1900. George was producing hundreds of thousands of loaves per week. Do the math. That's thousands of dollars weekly in an era when the average worker made $10 per week. But here's the really crazy part. George Weston died in 1924. Most empires die with their founders. The Weston Empire was just getting started. His son, Garfield Weston, took over. And Garfield was even more ambitious than his dad. While George thought locally, Garfield thought globally. In 1935, Garfield did something bold. He moved to London, England. Why? Because he saw opportunity during hard times. Britain was recovering from World War I, businesses were struggling. Real estate was cheap. Garfield started buying British bakeries. Then he bought biscuit companies. Then he bought a controlling stake in Fortnum and Mason, the luxury grocer that served the British royal family. A Canadian baker's son now supplied goods to kings and queens. The comparison here blows my mind. Imagine if the owner of Dunkin' Donuts suddenly also owned Tiffany's. That's basically what Garfield pulled off. By the 1940s, the Weston Empire operated on 2 continents. They had massive factories in Canada producing millions of biscuits and bread loaves. They had luxury shops in London serving high society. They had supply chains that moved goods across the Atlantic. World War II made them even richer. Governments needed food suppliers who could deliver at scale. The Westons could. They won massive contracts feeding troops. War is terrible, but it mints fortunes for those positioned right. Here's a specific example that shows their scale. During the war, Weston's British bakeries produced over 5 million pounds of biscuits per week for military rations. That's not just business. That's national infrastructure. After the war, Garfield made another brilliant move. He saw that people wanted convenience. Women were entering the workforce. Families had less time to bake at home. So he expanded into packaged foods. Wonder Bread becomes a Weston brand in Canada. Twinkies-style snack cakes hit Canadian shelves under Weston labels. Every kid's lunchbox started containing Weston products, even if the parents didn't realize it. Now connect this to your daily life. Think about how Amazon trained you to expect 2-day delivery. The Westons did something similar in the 1950s. They trained Canadians to expect fresh bread delivered to neighborhood stores every morning. They built the habit. Then they owned the habit. By 1960, Garfield Weston controlled over 1,500 companies across food, retail, and resources. The family was worth hundreds of millions, which equals billions today adjusted for inflation. And they were just warming up. But if you think that's crazy, wait until you hear this. The 1960s brought a new player into the game. Galen Weston Sr., Garfield's son. And Galen had a different vision entirely. His father built an empire on bread and biscuits. Galen wanted to build an empire on everything else. Here's where the Weston story goes from impressive to almost unbelievable. Galen looked at Canada in the 1970s and saw a country about to transform. Resources were booming. Cities were growing. A middle class was emerging with money to spend. And he made a decision that would change everything. He would shift from just making products to owning the places where people buy everything. In 1972, Galen took control of a struggling grocery chain called Loblaws. It was losing money. Stores were outdated. Nobody thought it could compete with bigger American chains moving into Canada. Galen thought differently. He didn't just want to fix Loblaws. He wanted to revolutionize Canadian grocery shopping. First move, he created President's Choice, a private label brand that actually competed with premium brands. This was revolutionary. Store brands were supposed to be cheap and low quality. President's Choice products were premium but cost less than name brands. The decadent chocolate chip cookie launched in 1984. It became legendary. People drove across town just to buy these cookies. A store brand creating cult-level loyalty. That wasn't supposed to happen. But here's the insider insight most people miss: the President's Choice wasn't about cookies. It was about control. Every President's Choice product sold meant higher profit margins for Loblaws. No middleman. No brand manufacturer taking a cut. Pure vertical integration, just like great-grandpa George did with bread. By 1990, President's Choice had over 1,500 products. Canadians were buying Weston-owned food in Weston-owned stores using Weston-issued loyalty cards. The family didn't just sell groceries. They owned the entire customer experience. Now, the contrast between then and now is staggering. In 1972, Loblaws was one struggling chain. By 2000, Loblaws Companies Limited was Canada's largest food retailer. They owned Loblaws, Zehrs, Real Canadian Superstore, No Frills, and dozens more banners. Let me give you the scale in numbers you can grasp. Loblaws today operates over 2,400 stores across Canada. That's roughly one Loblaws-owned store for every 16,000 Canadians. For comparison, there's about one Starbucks for every 36,000 Americans. The Westons literally built a network where most Canadians can't live more than 15 minutes from a Weston-owned store. But Galen wasn't done. In 2013, Loblaws bought Shoppers Drug Mart for $12.4 billion. This was massive. Shoppers Drug Mart wasn't just a pharmacy. It was where Canadians bought cosmetics, filled prescriptions, picked up essentials, and grabbed last-minute gifts. One family now controlled where most Canadians bought food and medicine. Think about that power dynamic. Now for the hidden mechanism most people never see. The Westons own the real estate under many of their stores. Not just the business, but the land and buildings. When other retailers want to open near a Loblaws, they often have to lease property from Loblaws. This is the Weston real estate game. They use their retail presence to anchor shopping plazas. Then they lease surrounding space to other tenants at premium rates. The grocery store might break even, but the real estate makes millions. According to sources in Canadian commercial real estate, Choice Properties REIT, a Weston-controlled entity, owns over 500 properties worth approximately $15 billion. That's more than most American regional mall operators. Here's the global angle that connects to American viewers. Galen Weston Sr. didn't stop at Canada. He bought Selfridges in London in 2003. This is one of the world's most famous luxury department stores. The Westons transformed it into a retail destination that reportedly generated over £1 billion in annual sales. They also expanded into Ireland, where Galen's wife Hilary became a fashion entrepreneur and philanthropist. The family literally bought and restored Foot Belvedere, a former royal residence. They moved in aristocratic circles while running grocery chains. High and low, luxury and everyday, all controlled by one family. The more complex reality is this: the Westons don't just compete in retail. They've built an ecosystem where they profit at multiple levels simultaneously. They manufacture products, distribute through their own trucks, sell in their own stores, collect data through their loyalty programs, and own the real estate under it all. This brings us to the most shocking discovery of all. Everything I've told you so far is impressive. But it's not the real story. The real story is about control. Not just business control. National-level control. Here's the truth that will reframe everything. The Weston family doesn't just own stores. They own critical infrastructure that Canadians depend on for basic survival. Let me explain what I mean. In Canada, 3 major grocery chains control about 70% of the market. Loblaws is the largest by far. During COVID-19, this became crystal clear. When lockdowns hit in March 2020, Canadians rushed to stores. Shelves emptied. Supply chains broke. And the Weston family made decisions that affected millions of people's access to food. Loblaws stayed open as an essential service. They controlled inventory distribution. They set prices. They decided what products were prioritized. The government granted them special status and permissions. Now, I'm not saying they did anything wrong. But think about the power dynamic. One family, through their business empire, had more influence over Canadian food access than most government agencies. Here are specific examples that show the scale. During the pandemic's first year, Loblaws and Shoppers Drug Mart combined served approximately 15 million Canadian customers per week. That's nearly 40% of Canada's total population shopping at Weston-owned stores weekly. They controlled masks when masks were scarce. They controlled hand sanitizer when everyone needed it. They controlled cleaning supplies, toilet paper, and basic groceries. The shortages you remember. The Westons decided who got what and when. Reports suggest Loblaws saw profits increase by over 30% during 2020 compared to 2019. While small businesses collapsed, the Weston empire grew stronger. They hired more workers, opened more pharmacy locations, and expanded delivery services. But here's where things get really interesting. The Westons have faced multiple controversies over the years that reveal how much control they actually have. In 2017, Loblaws admitted to participating in a bread price fixing scheme that lasted 14 years. From 2001 to 2015, major Canadian grocers allegedly coordinated to keep bread prices artificially high. The Competition Bureau investigated. Loblaws agreed to cooperate and offered customers $25 gift cards as compensation. Think about the irony. The company founded on affordable bread was accused of making bread too expensive. And the settlement? Gift cards that could only be used at Loblaws stores. They turned a scandal into customer acquisition. Now let's talk about labor and wages. Loblaws employs over 200,000 people across Canada. That makes them one of the country's largest private employers. They've faced criticism over wages, working conditions, and labor practices for decades. In 2017, Loblaws cancelled a $2 per hour pay raise for workers, citing Ontario's minimum wage increase. Workers who made $11.50 per hour were going to make $13.50. The company said the minimum wage hike to $14 meant they couldn't afford the additional $2 raise they promised. The math here is revealing. Loblaws made billions in profit that year. But they cancelled raises for frontline workers. This sparked public backlash, boycotts, and national debates about corporate responsibility. The Weston response. Galen Weston Jr. defended the decision, saying the company needed to stay competitive. But sources close to labor negotiations suggest the real reason was sending a message to other provinces considering minimum wage increases. One family, using their massive employer status, influencing national wage policy debates. That's system-level power. Here's another angle that connects everything. The Westons control data on Canadian shopping habits through PC Optimum, the loyalty program used by over 18 million Canadians. That's more than half the country's adult population. Every purchase tracked. Every preference recorded. Every habit analyzed. This data is worth more than the products themselves. It tells you what Canadians buy, when they buy it, how much they'll pay, and how to influence their future decisions. According to retail analysts, loyalty program data has become one of retail's most valuable assets. The Westons have the richest dataset on Canadian consumer behavior outside of the government itself. They know more about what Canadians eat, how they shop, and what they spend in Statistics Canada in many ways. Now for the biggest reveal. The Weston family has turned their business empire into something that resembles a private fiefdom. They control critical needs, food, medicine, data, real estate, and employment for hundreds of thousands of people. And here's the part that should make you think. When one family controls this much of daily life, what does that mean for competition? For innovation? For fair pricing? For workers? For consumers? The Westons have built something remarkable. But they've also built something unprecedented in modern democratic capitalism. A private empire with quasi-governmental influence over a nation's well-being. So what does all this mean for us today? Let's break down what the Weston Empire means for regular people. Because this isn't just a story about rich people. It's about how concentrated wealth reshapes entire economies. First, the short-term reality. If you're Canadian, the Westons influence your daily life whether you know it or not. The food you eat, the medicine you take, the places you shop, and the prices you pay all flow through their ecosystem. If you're American, this should matter because the same consolidation is happening in the US. A handful of families and corporations are buying up everything from grocery chains to pharmacies to housing. The Weston model is spreading south. Let me give you practical examples of what this means. When Loblaws raises prices, smaller competitors have to follow or risk looking overpriced. When Loblaws sets wages, it creates a benchmark for the entire retail sector. When Loblaws introduces a new private label product, it can price it to undercut national brands because they control the shelf space. This is market power in action. It's not illegal. But it changes the game for everyone else. Now, the long-term consequences get more complex. As the Westons continue expanding their real estate holdings, they're buying the physical spaces where commerce happens. This means future retailers will need Weston approval, Weston leases, and Weston terms just to open a store. Sources in Canadian commercial real estate report that Choice Properties, the Weston-controlled REIT, has been aggressively acquiring properties in growing neighborhoods. They're betting on Canadian population growth and urbanization. Smart bet. But it also means the family will own even more of the country's commercial infrastructure in 20 years. Here's a prediction that's both simple and significant. The Weston Empire will keep growing because they've mastered something most businesses struggle with: generational transition. Most family fortunes disappear within 3 generations. The Westons are now into their 5th generation of wealth building, and they're stronger than ever. Galen Weston Jr. took over seamlessly after his father died. The succession was smooth. The empire didn't miss a beat. Why does this work for the Westons? They've built institutional knowledge, professional management teams, and systems that don't depend on one person's genius. The family provides vision and capital. Professional executives handle operations. This corporate structure protects the empire from the usual family business problems like sibling rivalries, incompetent heirs, or generational conflicts. Now for the personal takeaways you can actually use. The Weston story teaches several lessons applicable to your own financial life. Lesson 1: Vertical integration creates defensive moats. When you control multiple steps in a value chain, you protect yourself from disruption. In your life, this might mean building multiple income streams that support each other. Lesson 2: Boring businesses done excellently beat exciting businesses done poorly. The Westons built their empire on bread, groceries, and real estate. Not sexy, but reliable and essential. The most successful businesses solve everyday problems. Lesson 3: Data is more valuable than products. The Westons understand this. Their loyalty program is really a data gathering system. In your career, the skills and knowledge you accumulate become more valuable than any single job. Lesson 4, Real assets appreciate. The Westons have always invested in physical assets, factories, stores, land, buildings. These hold value during economic chaos. For you, this might mean prioritizing assets over consumption. Lesson 5, Staying private preserves power. The Weston companies are privately held or controlled through structures that protect family ownership. They don't answer to public shareholders demanding quarterly growth. They can make long-term decisions. This teaches us that maintaining control is sometimes worth more than raising capital. But let's not romanticize this. The Weston Empire also shows the problems with concentrated wealth. When one family controls so much, markets become less competitive. Workers have less negotiating power. Consumers have fewer choices. Innovation slows because dominant players don't need to innovate. According to Canadian economic researchers, the grocery sector has seen minimal innovation in decades precisely because a few players control everything. Why change the model when it's working so well for you? The pandemic exposed this vulnerability. Supply chain issues hit hard. Prices spiked. And regular Canadians had limited alternatives. You couldn't just switch to a different grocery ecosystem because one family and their main competitors controlled nearly all the options. Here's the thing about monopolistic systems. They're efficient until they're not. They work great during normal times. But when crisis hits, the lack of redundancy and competition becomes dangerous. The Weston Empire is a marvel of business strategy. It's also a cautionary tale about what happens when capitalism consolidates too much power in too few hands. For American viewers, watch your own market. Amazon is doing to American retail what the Westons did to Canadian retail. Private equity is buying up housing, healthcare, and local businesses. The same consolidation patterns are emerging. The question isn't whether you admire the Westons' business skills. The question is whether this level of economic control is healthy for society. Before we wrap up, there's one final thing you need to know. Here's a prediction that's both simple and significant. The Weston Empire will keep growing because they've mastered something most businesses struggle with: generational transition. Most family fortunes disappear within 3 generations. The Westons are now into their 5th generation of wealth building, and they're stronger than ever. Galen Weston Jr. took over seamlessly after his father died. The succession was smooth. The empire didn't miss a beat. Why does this work for the Westons? They've built institutional knowledge, professional management teams, and systems that don't depend on one person's genius. The family provides vision and capital. Professional executives handle operations. This corporate structure protects the empire from the usual family business problems like sibling rivalries, incompetent heirs, or generational conflicts. Now for the personal takeaways you can actually use. The Weston story teaches several lessons applicable to your own financial life. Lesson 1: Vertical integration creates defensive moats. When you control multiple steps in a value chain, you protect yourself from disruption. In your life, this might mean building multiple income streams that support each other. Lesson 2: Boring businesses done excellently beat exciting businesses done poorly. The Westons built their empire on bread, groceries, and real estate. Not sexy, but reliable and essential. The most successful businesses solve everyday problems. Lesson 3: Data is more valuable than products. The Westons understand this. Their loyalty program is really a data gathering system. In your career, the skills and knowledge you accumulate become more valuable than any single job. Lesson 4: Real assets appreciate. The Westons have always invested in physical assets, factories, stores, land, buildings. These hold value during economic chaos. For you, this might mean prioritizing assets over consumption. They stay quiet, run good operations, and avoid scandals when possible. Compare them to other billionaire families. The Waltons of Walmart face constant criticism. Jeff Bezos is a punching bag for labor activists. Elon Musk can't stop tweeting controversies. The Westons. Most Canadians don't even know they exist. This invisibility is their superpower. You can't resent what you don't see. You can't boycott a family you don't know controls the store. Now let's tie this back to the opening hook. I said one family basically owns Canada. And now you understand what that means. They don't own it legally like property. They own it functionally through control of essential systems. The story started with George Weston baking bread in 1882. A simple man with simple ambitions. Just wanted to feed his city and make a decent living. 143 years later, his descendants control the food supply, pharmaceutical distribution, retail real estate, and consumer data for an entire country. They've built relationships with every level of government. They've shaped urban development through real estate holdings. They've influenced labor markets through massive employment. And they did it all while most people barely noticed. This is what real power looks like in the modern world. Not kings with crowns. Not politicians with titles. But families who control the infrastructure of daily life so completely that society can't function without them. The Weston story is inspiring if you focus on the business brilliance. 5 generations building and preserving wealth through smart strategy, hard work, and long-term thinking. That's impressive by any standard. But the story is also cautionary if you focus on the market concentration. When too much power consolidates in too few hands, it creates systemic risks and democratic concerns that transcend business admiration. Here's my take after researching this family for weeks. The Westons are neither heroes nor villains. They're rational actors who played the game better than anyone else and won bigger than anyone else. They saw opportunities and seized them. They built systems and defended them. They adapted across generations while maintaining core principles. They balanced growth with sustainability. But they also benefited from timing, connections, and market conditions that allowed consolidation on this scale. They faced less antitrust scrutiny than American companies would face doing the same things. They operated in a country small enough to dominate but wealthy enough to support a massive empire. The real question isn't about the Westons specifically. It's about the system that allows this level of concentration to develop. Should any family control this much of a nation's daily life? Should groceries, pharmacies, real estate, and data be concentrated under one private entity? Should essential services be organized for maximum profit or maximum public benefit? These aren't questions with easy answers. They require balancing business freedom with public interest. Rewarding success while preventing monopolies. Encouraging entrepreneurship while protecting competition. What I can tell you is this: the Weston Empire will continue growing. Galen Weston Jr. is in his early 50s. He's got decades left to lead. The next generation is already being groomed. The systems are in place. In 20 years, the Westons might control even more of Canada than they do today. They'll probably expand further into the United States. They'll definitely increase their real estate holdings. They'll integrate more data systems and more supply chains. Unless something dramatic changes in market regulation or competitive dynamics, the empire George Weston started with a bread shop will keep expanding. And most people still won't know their name. That's the final irony. The family that owns so much remains invisible to those they serve. They've perfected the art of ubiquitous power hidden in plain sight. If this opened your eyes, let's recap what you just discovered, because this is information most people will never learn. First, the Weston family built the biggest retail empire in Canadian history over 5 generations, starting with one bread shop in Toronto and expanding into a multi-billion-dollar system controlling food, medicine, real estate, and data. Second, they don't just compete in markets, they own the entire ecosystem from manufacturing to distribution to retail to real estate, profiting at every level while staying almost completely invisible to the public. Third, Their control over Canadian daily life gives them power that resembles infrastructure rather than just business, affecting everything from food access to wages to shopping data for tens of millions of people. Fourth, they've mastered generational wealth transfer better than almost any family in history, with each generation expanding the empire while maintaining family control through private structures that avoid public scrutiny. These aren't just business facts. This is a blueprint for how modern power actually works. Not through force or politics, but through controlling the systems people need every single day. Now, if you found this video valuable, here's what I need from you. Hit that subscribe button because I'm exposing more stories like this, the hidden families and companies that control more than you realize. Stories about American dynasties, global monopolies, and power structures hiding in plain sight. Like this video if you made it this far. It tells YouTube this content matters and helps more people discover these stories. The algorithm doesn't show you what's important. It shows you what's popular. Make this popular so others can learn what you just learned. Drop a comment with your biggest takeaway. Or tell me this, should any family be allowed to control this much of a country's economy? I'm genuinely curious what you think. There's no wrong answer. This is about starting conversations that matter. But here's my deeper request. Share this video with someone who thinks they understand how the economy works. Because most economic education skips the real story. They teach you about supply and demand. They don't teach you about the families who control supply and manipulate demand. Most people think markets are neutral forces. Competition is fair. Success is merit-based. Then you study families like the Westons and realize markets are controlled by those with enough power to shape them. Competition is managed. Success often comes from consolidation rather than innovation. That's not cynical. That's just reality. And understanding reality gives you better tools to navigate it. Here's what you should watch next. I've got a video coming about the American families who control your food supply. You think the Westons are impressive? Wait until you learn about the families who control American agriculture, meat processing, and food distribution. It's the same pattern, bigger scale, more hidden. I'm also building a deeper resource for people who want to understand wealth and power beyond surface-level business news. If you're interested in that, check the link in the description. No fluff. Just research-backed analysis about how money and power actually operate in the modern world. Because here's what I've learned from making these videos. Most people are hungry for the truth. They're tired of clickbait. They're done with shallow content. They want to understand the real mechanics of the world they live in. That's what I'm building here. A community of people who want to see beyond the surface. Who asks better questions. Who understands that the most important stories are often the least reported ones. The Weston family succeeded because they saw what others missed. They acted while others hesitated. They built systems while others built businesses. They thought in generations while others thought in quarters. You might not have their resources. But you can adopt their mindset. Think bigger. Act longer term. Build systems instead of just working in them. Create value that compounds across time. That's the real lesson from this story. The tactics are specific to retail and Canada. But the principles apply everywhere. Control beats competition. Systems beat hustle. Long-term beats short-term. Invisible beats are famous. Whether you're building a business, advancing your career, or just trying to understand the world better, these principles matter. The game has rules. But the rules aren't what they teach in school. The rules are what families like the Westons demonstrate through their actions over decades. So here's my challenge for you. Pick one principle from the Weston story and apply it to your own life this week. Maybe it's thinking about vertical integration in your career. Maybe it's focusing on boring excellence instead of exciting mediocrity. Maybe it's just paying attention to who actually controls the systems you use every day. Small changes compound. That's how George Weston turned one bread shop into a national empire. He didn't make one big move. He made thousands of small moves in the same direction over decades. Then his kids continued the pattern. Then their kids did the same. You might not build a billion-dollar empire. But you can build something meaningful. You can create something that lasts. You can understand the world well enough to make better decisions about your time, money, and attention. And honestly, that's what this channel is really about. Not just telling you about rich people, but helping you understand the systems that create and sustain wealth. So you can navigate those systems more effectively. So you can protect yourself from exploitation. So you can maybe build something significant yourself. The Weston family doesn't want you to know their story. They prefer operating in the shadows. But knowledge is power. And now you have knowledge most people don't have. What you do with that knowledge is up to you. You can forget it and go back to normal life. Or you can start seeing the world differently. Start asking who really controls the things you depend on. Start noticing the patterns. Start thinking like someone who builds systems instead of someone who's trapped in them. One last thing before you go. If this video made you think, if it challenged your assumptions, if it gave you a new framework for understanding power and wealth, then my job is done. But your job is just starting. Because information without action is just entertainment. And I didn't make this to entertain you. I made this to educate you. To arm you with knowledge that matters. To help you see the invisible architecture of modern capitalism. So take this knowledge. Share it. Use it. Build on it. Teach someone else. Start conversations. Ask harder questions. Demand better answers. The Westons built an empire by seeing what others missed. Now you've seen it too. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. And remember, the biggest power in the world is the power nobody knows exists.